Well, hello everybody. It's Mitch Weisberg joining you with Bridget Johnson. Welcome to Mind Shifting Monday with Mitch in December, and we're going to be talking about mindsets because that's what we decided to talk about. Um, but but basically, we're talking about mindsets because for anything that you do, um, whether you're successful, whether you're not successful, whether you give up, whether you persist, it really always begins with the mindset. And I thought, Bridget and I met about a month ago, and I was just like so impressed after talking with her. It's like, if you don't mind, please come on my live event. Bridget has founded a community called the Deans Roundtable, which is a professional development community for student life leaders, right?
Yep.
Um, she helps schools by evaluating their school culture, whether they're geared for learning and student thriving, and she coaches leaders on leadership. So, is there what did I leave out that's important?
Well, I think the only thing and thanks so much for the introduction, by the way, it was great. But I do work with student life professionals. So anyone working with students outside the classrooms, deans of students, class deans, director of student life, director of residential life, those folks who are usually the kind of the only ones on their campus doing their thing. So that's the
Right.
only thing I would add.
And then, so in working with these student advisors, what
Mhm.
maybe just describe what is it that those advisors or what those counselors do regarding the students?
Yeah, it's so important. And it's kind of the linchpin of what really kind of makes or breaks a student experience, in my opinion. The advisor's like a relational anchor for students. They build trusting relationships that are consistent. They help students feel seen, known, and supported. They serve as primary adult who monitors a student's academic, social, and emotional well-being.
Mhm.
They facilitate conversations about identity, belonging, responsibility, and decision making. They help students make meaning of their experiences and navigate their challenges at a pretty kind of difficult, but tumultuous time as an
Right.
adolescent. It can be tricky, right? Navigating all that for the first time.
Well, there's a lot of changes, whether they're a student life professional in, let's say, a high school, or student
Hmm.
life professional in college. Those kids are going through a lot of life changes,
A
and
lot of
and
life changes. Yep.
yeah, and it's chaotic,
It is
and
chaotic. I think
and
that's the word
complex.
that's probably, yeah,
Yeah.
chaotic is probably the better word. I like that word, Mitch. Thanks for giving me that this Monday afternoon.
Right.
um, But they also help students that mean have no, they help create psychologically safe micro communities within the school, which I think is
Mhm.
super important because you need a space where you feel like you can be yourself, you can ask the questions, you can do the thing without feeling judged in any way. The advice is also partner with families and collaborate with colleagues to support students' needs. And they also model healthy communication, emotional regulation, and leadership presence. So it's a tall order, right, for
Right.
for the adults in the community. But at its core, it helps students develop the mindsets and skills that allow them to thrive in school and in life.
And the advisors themselves, what do they find their biggest challenges are, or what are the issues that you help them overcome?
That's a great question. And so oftentimes, it's unclear role expectations because sometimes schools will say, yeah, we have advisory, and advisory is super important, but they've never talked about what the mission or the goal of advisory is supposed to be. And
Mhm.
so you can ask, three teachers on campus about why do we have advisory? You'll probably get three different answers. So being
Right.
unclear is tricky. And then lack of structure or curriculum, if you're just telling people go forth and advise, that's also not helpful either, especially if people have difficulty facilitating conversations, difficult conversations around identity, conflict, or other sensitive topics. If you haven't given anyone the tools, it's hard for them to actually, kind of be the architect, for lack of a better term. Teachers are great at teaching. They know their craft. They understand their craft. And sometimes people equate that to being great advisors. And
Mhm.
that is not the same thing at
Right.
all. And
Uh-huh.
so they need some training and support in those areas. And so, because that can lead to, if they're not trained and they don't understand their meaning or purpose, inconsistent boundaries or relational patterns, being too hands off or too involved, feeling unprepared to address those behavioral, social, emotional, mental health issues that you're not really
Mhm.
tackling as a classroom teacher, the burnout from emotional labor and the lack of support,
Wow.
and advisory feeling like just another thing versus a meaningful part of the school culture, feeling like it's something that they have to kind of check off the list.
And so as I'm listening to you, there's so many parallels with virtually everything we do. It's like, because I think you mentioned, first of all, knowing what you're trying to accomplish.
Right.
And so if you're not clear on what you're trying to accomplish, how are you going to work with people to help them accomplish
Accomplish
something, right?
things.
And
Right.
then given what you're trying to accomplish, you're going to be working with others. It's an appreciation for what types of problems those other people have. So it's like you have to understand what the other people are going through. And then third, having the skills to be able to coach people. So you're helping the coaches coach, but having the
Yes.
skills to be able to know where they're going, know what their problems are, and then
Yes.
how do you help them bridge those gaps between what the problems the students are facing and what they really want to achieve. And so that's basically what we all do is
Yeah.
throughout life, right?
Pretty much.
So looking back at they have to understand the students, and I think a lot of the people who are listening, um, they may not be advisors, but they understand the advisors, but they may have kids. So kids or students, what are the mindsets that are holding kids back?
So I would say kids, students, but also this can play out in your workplace. If you are managing or working with people that you have to either mentor or supervise, these can also be some of the same issues too. So I just wanted to
Hmm.
put that out there. But for students, in terms of um, why there can be issues or problems. For those students, they lose a key connection point. If the advising piece isn't going well, then they lose a key connection point. Someone who notices when they're off track or not kind of being their best selves, and they're not getting that support. They may feel unseen, unsupported, or misunderstood. And so, if a student is feeling that way every day when they show up in their community, it's hard for them to learn and be successful. They miss opportunities for developmental conversations that build belonging, resilience, and agency. And when advisory is inconsistent or poorly facilitated, students internalize the message that they're not worth the time or the intentionality.
And I think one of the things that I latched onto from just the incredible um, things that you work with the students and the advisors about is that uh, students are we all are going to thrive mostly from a sense of well-being. So if we don't,
Yes.
so so a major task of the advisor, and for example the teacher and the parent and the
Hmm.
manager and the coach, okay, is to first get the other individual in a sense where they feel good about themselves and they feel that there's a possibility that that they can succeed.
Yes, and but also not only they can succeed, but if they don't succeed, that it's okay. That they're in this
Oh,
place
beautiful. Right.
that is psychologically safe enough that if they fail, they don't feel like they're being ridiculed, laughed at, picked on, fill in the blank. That it is okay for me to do my very best and not succeed.
Mhm.
That is okay.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I'm thinking, wow, something, and that just feeds into like the survival or the limbic mindsets, where we
Hmm.
go into something and and if we're unsure about it, we're thinking, oh my gosh, if I fail, nobody's going to like me. I'm never
Right.
going to have another opportunity.
Exactly.
Um, it's going to mean that I'm a failure,
Hmm.
and so how do you advise the advisors to help others who may have that mindset like, oh my gosh, if I fail at this, it's going to ruin my whole life? What are the things that you do with them to help the kids overcome that, or help the people that they're managing?
Well, we have to recognize that limiting mindsets are essentially, protective strategies developed by the survival brain. So you talked about fear of failures, like avoiding threat, or I don't want to say the wrong thing, so you want to protect your social standing, or I don't belong here, scanning for danger in social environments. And so you really have to think about, when the survival brain is in charge, it's learning, empathy, problem solving, and connection, they all shut down. And so we've got to think about how, as advisors, we can kind of break through that and say, okay, we're going to flip these things on their ear. We're going to make sure that you are being more comfortable with yourself, understanding that this is a space where you can be fail and be okay, that we can talk about it, that there's no judgment, right? And so before you can even do that, though, there's got to be some self-awareness with the adults themselves so they understand what's going on, be able to identify that with students. So understanding their emotional patterns, recognizing their biases, noticing their physical signs of getting triggered or
Mhm.
activated, but also feeling grounded in their values and knowing what those are. And so if you can do all those things, then you're less likely to react from the survival brain mode, and respond from the prefrontal cortex mode, which is the seat of reasoning, empathy, and presence.
So again, like what you're saying is triggering so many different things. One of the things is I'm just going to put up this QR code on on the screen. So if people want to
Okay.
download this, this is a free downloadable that when you're talking about well-being and the confidence to be able to move forward even when you start to doubt yourself and to be able to overcome your limbic brain, understanding what personal strengths are is really important to that. And so for people who are listening to us, when you're interested, if those who are interested, you can download this personal strengths inventory to both help you and also help others by helping them understand what their strengths are. And as you were talking about the survival brain and the limbic brain and how it's fear based, and how it shuts down our prefrontal cortex, that's not like a one and done, right? It's like
No.
um, so how do you what do you do when it crops up again? Like you may be able to defeat it once, but how do you keep on coming back from it?
Well, it's a practice, right? And so you mentioned you can't, it's not a one and done. And so what you need to do is kind of to teach yourself a couple of different things. And it's kind of a list. And sometimes I run through this list for myself, trying to get out of my head and get out of the kind of the negative spiral, the negative narrative, right? You got to name the mindset first because awareness interrupts kind of that automatic survival mode that you would go into.
And
Um,
you got to name the mindset, is it just saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm in my survival brain or I'm in my limbic brain," or is it something else like, "Oh my gosh, this is my fear of failure." What do you mean?
I think you have to be more specific. So naming the fear of failure or the not wanting to be judged or not feeling like that you have all the answers, like whatever that thing is, I think you need to say it out loud.
Mhm.
So hear yourself say it, or sometimes writing can also be helpful too. So some people like to journal, but putting it out there, as specific as you can is super important.
So you name it.
Yep.
Um, And so I'm just in the process of rereading a book on creativity by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who's
Mm,
passed away, but he was a psychologist from the University of Chicago. And one of the things that he said is that even after you're self-aware, that one of the things that's most effective in overcoming this limbic or this survival brain is to do something that takes some cognitive effort, but not a lot. Like, for
mm.
example, meditation, where you're paying attention to your breath, or walking, or, people who are proficient in music, playing some music, or maybe even listening to some music. And that, because if we left our brains to its own devices,
Oh
then
boy.
as soon as we get afraid, we immediately focus on being afraid. But when we
Yeah, we're
can
spiraling,
start,
absolutely.
right, yep. But when we can start um, thinking about something that we don't have to think hard about, it allows the rest of our brain then to do its work and come up with ways around whatever the problems that we have. So, I mean, as you're listening to me blubber through what Mihai Csikszentmihalyi said a lot better than I did, what are your thoughts?
Well, I also think, once you kind of name the mindset and be able to put it out there, then you identify like what are you trying to protect yourself from, right? What are you
Hmm.
trying to keep yourself safe from? And so being able to do that, and then you replace that judgment with curiosity, like what's happening beneath the surface. But I really like what you talked about in terms of, building some micro habits and practicing some self-regulation tools, whether it's breathing, pausing, moving, going for a walk, playing some music, whatever that thing is for you that kind of gets you in a more relaxed state or kind of take
Hmm.
the temperature down, being able to do that, and recognizing when to do that, I think is more important. But developing those micro habits, checking in with yourself, giving yourself affirmations and some reframing techniques, because you said that the mind is a powerful thing, and once you kind of pull that thread of negativity,
Hmm.
that whole sweater is going to unravel if you don't arrest it pretty quickly.
Yep.
So you've got to change how you're speaking to yourself,
Hmm.
and realize when it's coming on. You might say it once, you'd be like, "Oh, I'm not saying that again. That is not true," and reverse that with some more positive affirmations and positive thoughts.
And as you're saying, the positive thoughts, um the first thing that occurs to me, which is probably wrong, which is like to go back and say, Mitch, you idiot, you can't be thinking this way, you shouldn't be afraid. that that's not a
Maybe not
positive
that
thought,
way, Mitch.
right?
Maybe be a little bit more gentler with yourself. Like,
Okay.
come on, Mitch, we can do this. We can be better about this. This is not positive. We're going to shift. I am good at what I do. I can do hard things. Those sorts of positive affirmations.
Hmm.
Not, Mitch, you dummy. Like, we don't want to do that.
Okay. So I'm gonna work on that. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
One step at a time, right?
One step at a time. Um, so if you were I guess a student life advisor, or
Hmm.
actually if you're working with anybody and you notice that they seem to be stuck in this survival mode of being afraid to move forward, how would you advise somebody to help somebody else who's stuck?
That's a great question. I think it was just kind of talking about what we just did, naming the mindset, naming the place where they're stuck, or naming the thing, and putting that out there, and then really breaking it down. It's like, for me, when I get overwhelmed and I feel like, oh my gosh, I have so many things going on, I can't possibly get anything done,
Hmm.
nothing's going well for me. If I sit down and kind of write a list out of all the things I feel like I need to get done, and I look at them like, oh, it's actually not as bad as I thought. So sometimes we just got to get out of our heads, and get out of our own ways. And doing that, talking with someone can
Hmm.
sometimes do that. Journaling can do that as well. But when you can kind of arrest it quickly, the better off you can. So you don't want to spend too much time kind of spiraling going down that path. You want to recognize it as quickly as you can, and then start to kind of reverse those behaviors, or identify the issue, get yourself grounded, go for a walk, take a pause, write down the list, do an action that can reverse that.
So, I'm trying to, so kind of paraphrasing what you just said to see if I got it. Okay,
Okay.
is that if you notice somebody else who seems to be in this spiral, one thing to do is to help them recognize that they're in limbic mode, or that they're in survival mode, and maybe ask them a question. Do you think that this is your survival brain, or do you think that that you're in real danger, or questions like that? And then once they realize that they're in survival mode, other things that you can do is to say, well, so let's write down a list of some of the things that you have to do that you might be afraid of, and just the process of writing them down will sometimes calm them down. Um,
Yes.
and then and then maybe you also can distract them a little bit by helping them by going for a walk with them or talking about something else that's pleasurable to them. I think that you brought that up also. And then I think uh, that you also brought up a couple more, but I'm like, now the brain cells aren't. I can't I can't go back there. But I think just even those, like helping somebody say out loud what they're feeling, helping them
Mhm.
write down what they have to do,
Yep.
helping them distract by breathing, walking, talking about something else, and then and then also I think you brought up helping them visualize what they want to accomplish and go. You know Feel as if, well, how are you, the questions like, how are you going to feel when, despite the fact that you were a little bit afraid of it a few minutes ago, you did it anyhow and you succeeded? How do you think you're going to feel then? And getting them to really feel those emotions, and that will also help motivate them. So I think those are the tips that you had brought up, which are like, wow, those sound great to me.
Well, good. I'm glad they sound great to you. And I think they're, taken in small chunks, they're doable. You don't have to
Mhm.
like, okay, now I've got to do the 10 things right now.
Right.
Doing the first two or three can really help you until you kind of get to the point where you are recognizing within yourself, oh, this is coming up. I feel like I'm
Mhm.
getting triggered, or I feel like I'm getting anxious, or I feel like I'm going down a negative spiral. Knowing what to do initially is half the battle. Then you can kind of be a little bit more sophisticated, a little more detailed once you've
Mhm.
kind of gotten the first couple of steps in place.
Right, and I guess just the other technique that you just brought up is to, once they have the list, is to just focus, as you say, on the first one or two things, so they don't have to
Hmm.
think about, oh my gosh, I have a list of 10 things I have to do. It's like, well, okay, what's the
And
first thing
now
that
I'm
you have to
anxious
do?
about the
Right,
things I have to
right,
do.
right. But it's like, well, can you do this first thing, and let's get this first thing done, and then we'll get back
Exactly.
together and talk about the next thing.
Small bites,
Right.
small bites.
And so that would work if you're if you're coaching other people. I get
Mhm.
and I My guess is that the advisors go through the same things themselves in their own jobs, is that they get
Absolutely.
anxious about, oh my gosh, look at all the students I have to help, or look at all the things
Hmm.
that I have to do.
Yep.
And part of your coaching to help turn them into leaders and other people who are leading is to get them to adopt the mindsets that allow them to move forward. And um and and so what would a typical, if somebody were to say, well, Bridget, I'm moving into a new position, can you help me be a leader? What are some of the typical things that you would do?
I would do a couple of things. One, I would kind of ask them what they're most excited about in terms of the work that they're
Oh.
about to embark on, because I think that's important. Two, I would tell them that it's always important to not feel like you have to have all the answers, that it is okay to be curious and to ask questions, don't assume and don't judge. And two, surround yourself with people who are know more than you do. So that's where we would start,
Well,
but
wait a minute. I think aren't if I surround myself with people who know more than I do, aren't they going to make me look bad?
no, they're probably gonna make you look pretty good, actually. Know thyself, know what your strengths are, know what you bring to the table,
Hmm.
and know how that fits with the group, in totality.
See, for me, that happens to be very easy because I'm always surrounded by people who know a lot more than I do. So that's why I invited you. So thank you.
No, stop. I'll send you the check in the mail, you just gotta send
Right.
me your address.
So I guess if you could come up with like two or three things that you would most want people to come out of this conversation with, what would be like your top three things?
One, that everyone goes through this kind of period in their mind where they're second guessing or questioning or beating themselves up or going through kind of a negative spiral. We all do that at some point.
Hmm.
But it's important to stop it as soon as you can, and replace that with all of the good things that you know about yourself. That would be number one. Number two is that also remember that, other people are going through this as well. And so sometimes people aren't their best selves because they are doing this in their mind and they're spiraling down. And
Hmm.
so instead of kind of being judgy in those moments, be more curious and see how you can help those people kind of pull themselves out of that spiral.
Hmm.
I think, let's see, the third thing that I would say is that, it's always good to just kind of take a pause, take a beat, take a breath. I feel like we are always operating and, educators, especially, like, there's not enough time in the day. There's always
Right.
something else you have to do. But if you just pause and breathe for a minute and take the time
Hmm.
to make that connection, whether it's with a student or another adult, it really goes a long way for everyone involved.
Wow. Yeah, when you said the pause, it just reminded me of something that happened just like 3 days ago. So
Uh-huh.
so I'm a member of my local Rotary chapter,
Uh-huh.
and I was talking to a person, and I heard the chapter president talking to another person, and
Okay.
the chapter president was saying, I just read Mitch's book on mind shifting, conflict, and collaboration, and I just started understanding how often I'm in my survival brain, and I was talking to somebody,
Mm,
and I was like pushing them, and all of a sudden I realized, something. Mitch is right. This is my survival brain. Let me pause a second and figure out a couple other things that I can do. How do I approach this from a sense of curiosity? And he says, and that made a tremendous amount of difference. So that's pretty. Isn't
wow,
that cool?
yeah.
Isn't that cool? So that's
That is very
exactly,
cool.
yeah, that's exactly the things that you were talking about also.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. That's awesome.
so if people wanted to get in touch with you, if they wanted to be, if they're in a position where they're advising kids, or if they're in a
Mhm.
position where they're moving into a leadership position or advancing
Uh-huh.
their leadership position, and they want to be better, how would they reach you?
Great. Thank you for asking that. And so I do have a website called deansroundtable.org, but more specifically, you can reach me via email at bridget@deansroundtable.org. And I'm also LinkedIn, Bridget Johnson, and you'll see that Dean's Roundtable will pop up there. So very accessible.
So deansroundtable.org is
Yep,
the website.
is the website.
Okay, and then also your first name, Bridget, at
Yep,
deansroundtable.org, or just look up Bridget Johnson on LinkedIn.
on LinkedIn. Yep, I
Okay.
am there.
Okay. So, well, we're heading into the holiday season, and I want to wish you a very, very happy holiday. I think that you've given people incredible tools that they can use to calm themselves, and also to co-regulate with others, whether those others are kids, or those others are adults. So, starting off with the self-awareness, or the awareness of the other, of the other person, helping the person, feel good about themselves, a sense of well-being, helping the person name what they're feeling, and then tools to allow themselves to move from the fear-based reactions to responses that really reflect people's values and goals.
Yeah,
So
you did a great job of summarizing that, Mitch. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And I am so thankful to have this opportunity to chat with you, and then happy holidays to you as well.
yeah, and we'll be talking more next year.
Yes, we will, absolutely, because I can't wait to have you on the Dean's Roundtable
Oh,
podcast. So
thank you, thank
stay
you.
tuned, folks.
Okay, let me end the stream, and everybody, have a very happy holiday season. If you're seeing this actually after the holiday season, I hope you had a wonderful holiday season. And we'll be here Mondays at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. Mind shifting Mondays with Mitch.